Welcome everyone to this video tutorial about project modifications in Jems. So with this video tutorial, we would like to give you more details and more insight on how project modifications are done in Jems. So this is basically from the moment the project is approved and you would like to make changes to a project itself. So with this tutorial, we will also look at the details that are developed in version 4 and have a little bit of an insight into the features that will be coming with the 5th release, and also some features that are done out of the system and that should come later. So let's go into the status flows and see how a project is done according to a status flow procedure. So there are two types of modifications that we have identified in Jems. So we have the modifications before contracted in Jems, which go from a status approved, so not from a status contracted. And you could make project changes to the project from a status that is approved. So you could open a modification in a modification section. I will show this in a minute in the system, but to explain the statuses, this is of course done by a program user, and this creates a new version of the application form. Then the project will go into in modification pre-contracted, which is a draft status where the applicant can make changes to the project and then submit the application form. Once the application form is submitted, the project will go into modification pre-contracted submitted, which is a frozen state where the program can assess the modification and see if the changes have been made correctly. If the applicant, for example, did not make the changes correctly, the program could still hand back the modification for further improvements. This does not create a new version, so the changes done are not really tracked in the system, and then the project can be resubmitted. And then the project will be again back in the modification pre-contracted submitted. If the program is finally fine with the assessment and with the changes made, the program can either approve or reject the modification, which puts the project back into the status approved. So no matter if you reject the modification or approve a modification, the status of the entire project remains approved because the project was initially approved. However, you would actually, if you reject the modification, reject the version, which means that the previous version of the application form is the last approved version. I will also show this in a minute in Jems. Then for modifications after contracted in Jems, the project would of course be contracted, so no longer approved but contracted, and the modification status flow is identical. So you see that there are two different statuses, but they basically mean the same. So you could start a modification again as a program user, which creates a new version. Then the project would go into the status in modification. So not in modification pre-contracted, but in modification. And there the program user the applicant could submit the project or the beneficiary. And then the modification would be submitted and the whole flow would be the same. The unique thing is only that the statuses for now are different, so that potentially we could add some additional logic on top, which is for now not included yet in the 4th release. So what is then not included regarding to the modification procedure in Jems? So assessment checklists are not included because the checklist generator is not ready yet in Jems. This should come in the 5th and 6th release. But potentially modification should for now, or modification assessment should be done through an upload in the system. Request for modification by the beneficiary, so the first step should also be done out of the system. This has not been included yet. So this is basically the first step because most of the time a beneficiary will ask, can I do a project change because of a reason that, for example, a partner went bankrupt or there were some other changes to the project, and is this okay? That would be the question to the program. So this request should be done over email out of the system. Ideally, we will add at some point a feature for that in the system, but this is for now excluded. Also, comparison between the application form versions to quickly see what has been changed is also excluded from the Jems v4 so far. You can, however, export the application form versions in PDF, and you could use a third-party comparison tool to see the changes in the application form. So there is a workaround for this, but so these features are not included yet. But let's go to Jems and see how in Jems these modification procedures work. So I have navigated to the Jems system, our test environment, and I'm logged in as an administrator. And as you can see, there are a lot of projects here, and I've created a test project to show you how the modifications work from the status approved onwards. So if I navigate to this project, you can see that this project is approved, and that in the site navigation, there are a few new sections. So there's a contracting section where you can quickly set the project to contracted. We'll get to that in a minute. If you scroll down in the site navigation, you can also see a new section called Modification. This section, if you do not see it, you might not have the privileges for it. So make sure that you also check the system privileges to make sure that you have rights for this. This is kind of a program user section. So let's navigate there. And that is where a program user can open the project for modifications. So a program can open new modifications. It can always upload annexes and attachments. So you can already see that there is a document here uploaded by the administrator, and that there's already a modification that was approved apparently, and with some reasoning and explanatory notes. So this is kind of the assessment model for modifications. So let's open a new modification here by clicking the Open New Modification button. And you can see directly that I've opened a second modification. You can also see that once projects get submitted, that the version is then also directly stored related to the modification. And this is handy to see what changes have been made, because you can see, for example, here several versions, and you can see that the last approved version is version 3, which was the approved modification 1. So you can directly understand that the changes made, so this was the originally approved project, that the modification was approved and that this version was basically overwritten with a new latest approved version. It is not really overwritten because, of course, you can always navigate to the different versions to have a look at the system and the data. And you can see that I now have a new draft version here, which is version 4, because I just opened the modification. So let's now look at the system as an applicant user. So I've logged in in a different browser as an applicant user so that you can see what the applicant user can see. So let's go to the same project, and you can see now that the project is in modification pre-contracted, as I explained with the status flow. So the project could now make changes. So any changes could be done basically. You can add new partners, for example. So I could add a new partner, partner 4, and I can say this is the University of Vienna, Vienna University. And I can give it a status, so it's a public organization. And you can see that there's a new partner added. You might have also seen that in the partner overview, there's the status active and deactive. So basically, from the status approved onwards, a partner can no longer be deleted, but can only be deactivated. So let's also deactivate a partner. So for example, TU Delft, Technical University Delft, is no longer an active partner in this project. So we could basically click on deactivate, and you see that there's a button now, a pop-up window appearing, that partners cannot be reactivated again, because it really means that the partner left the project. So let's deactivate that partner, and you see directly that this partner has become inactive. And also that there is an icon here that shows that this partner is inactive. This does not do anything with the data in this partner or with the privileges, so you could still make changes. The idea is that the program or the project decides when this partner is really inactive by removing the users to that partner. And then the partner is basically can no longer do anything. And that way there's still possibility to still declare a last claim and do some last things. So this is about the activation of partners. There's also other changes you can do as an applicant, but let's for now just submit the project. I've added a new partner and deactivated one. So I now submitted the project again. I could also upload some annexes. Anything can be done like a usual project. So Usually there's also the pre-submission check, but as you can see, I've bypassed that, so that you can still, so this is easy for testing, but so that I can quickly submit the project without having to check everything. But usually if you have a pre-submission check, of course, all data has to be correct to be able to submit. And now you see that the status has gone to project modification pre-contracted submitted. So now if I go back to the other browser and I go to the admin, you can see that this partner, this project basically, if I refresh the page, you can see that it has two new partner and a deactivated partner, so that the changes have happened, and also that compared to the previous version, that did not happen. So you see that the data is correctly stored. I also see that there's a modification pre-contracted submitted project, so I can go to the modification section, and I could say, well, I would like that that you further improve the project, because I would like you also in the work plan to indicate why partner 4 was added. So I could say I hand back the project, and now the project is back in modification pre-contracted directly. So you see directly that the project has been set to an editable state. So I can now go back to the applicant user, and as an applicant, I can now again make changes to that project. Most likely you have to refresh. So you can see that I can now go to, for example, the work plan and say, well, in the communication objectives, I would like to say that partner 4, Vienna University, will contribute to the communication objectives. So I could add some changes like that and then submit the project again. And then as a program user, you could again see that this is kind of a different procedure because the project now still is on version 4. So actually the handback does not create a new version, but lets the applicant just make further improvements on the same version, version 4. So now I could go to the modification section and I see that the project is back on my side, and I could, for example, reject the modification because I find it not sufficient. So on today, I've decided to reject because I think, or because partner 3 wanted to stay in the project and should have not been deactivated, for example. And if I do that and I save, you see that the decision is directly made. So this is quite a quick procedure. And you see that here it clearly shows and also stored that the project modification has been rejected. So you see here that the modification was rejected and that version 4 was rejected, which means that version 3 is the last approved application form because I rejected this modification. If I would have approved it, it would have been the new last approved version. But for now, this was simple rejection. And you can see here also with the icons that this was the rejected version. So you can still go back to this as a program user and see, okay, this version was rejected. And I can see also here, it's saying that I'm looking at an old version because actually the last approved version is the version where reports are created from, because this is the last functioning version. So this is something important to know. I can then, for example, open another modification and do the same procedure and have the applicant make some changes again. Or quickly just add maybe again partner 4. So this was Vienna, and I add that one again, but I do not deactivate, and I will just submit the project like this. And then if I go to the project here, you can see that now the modification 3 is back on my side as a program user, and I could now approve this project. So let's not hand back anymore and just directly approve this version just to see what happens. I could also, of course, again add annexes or uploads. And now you see that there's a new version 5, which was the new modification, which is now approved. So you see in the past also that the order is properly stored. So you see there was a step 1 draft that didn't have a decision. There was a version 2 which was approved, a version 3 that was approved, and a version 4 that was rejected. And then version 5 was approved again. So the last approved version is actually version 5 with the new partner, University of Vienna. So you see that with this module, you can make project changes, and you can also see retroactively what has happened. Also, all these steps are of course stored in the audit log. So if I go to the audit log, you can see here under system audit log that these statuses have been changed. So the application form has gone from pre-contracted submitted to approved. And here it has gone from pre-contracted to modification pre-contracted submitted. So all these statuses are also stored in the system so that you know who did what at what moment. And basically now I could set the project to contracted to very quickly show you. So the contracting model is just a bypass for now. So there's just one button. There will be a lot of other modules, reporting schedules, etc. coming. For now, I could just simply set the project to contracted to show you that procedure. So you also see that the reporting model appears and that some other features come. But just to show you the modification procedure, so this is a project with the status contracted. And you can navigate to the application form and to the same section, and you could do in exactly the same way a modification. So basically the modification model stay existent, but now if I open a modification, you will see that the project has changed status because it now uses in modification and not in modification pre-contracted. So I'm now already working on a version 5 updated system. But there are some features that are restricted with the contracted in version 5. So this is not available yet in version 4, but just to briefly show you, one of the things is, for example, that you can no longer change flat rates. So if you had any flat rates in your project and you would like to change them, you can no longer do so from contracted onwards, because this would drastically change the budget. And there could already be partner reports, of course, under this project. So therefore, this is not allowed. Similar for the priority and the specific objective, they can also not be changed anymore in this modification procedure, because this would basically change the entire project and the intervention logic. So this is also to safeguard extreme project changes so that the project cannot be ruined, basically. So those things are different, but other than that, except for the statuses, the procedure is identical. So I can again submit the project, and as you can see, the project is now modification submitted. And I can also go then back as an admin. So I changed my browser again, and you can directly see that this project can also be approved again. And the difference, of course, is that the project then does not go to approved, but it goes back to status contracted. So you see now in the overview that the project's back to contracted. So now I did very quickly a modification version 6. Without any changes, but just to show you the procedure. The procedure works identical. It uses the same section modification, and there you can do exactly the same changes, but with some minor limitations, which are the budget options for partners and the section A to limit the priorities. This is, as I said, coming for version 5. So if you have version 4 installed, you have to be very careful as a program, because an applicant could theoretically change the project entirely. And this is basically how modifications work in a nutshell. So as said, after version 5, we might also get some place where applicants could request a modification. And if checklists are there, you might also be able to do in this section to add a checklist where programs can do an assessment of the modification, a reassessment of the project, basically, and then provide a decision. So those things are still missing. And also version comparison, you can see manually what versions are different. So for the site navigation, you see it quite quickly, of course, because you see here that this partner was added. But for the specific sections, you would have to go to each section and compare it with the current data. Or you could use the export module, export the version in PDF, and then use the compare with third-party comparison tool to compare the entire application form. So this was the video tutorial on modifications. We hope you find it helpful, and see you anytime soon. And if there's any questions, do not hesitate to ask them in the help desk so that we can assist you in any way. Thank you and have a nice day.